Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Philip Duncan from Weather Watch TV on YouTube with your 7-day Pacific-wide forecast. Let's get into it with the air pressure map to kick off with. Now it shows in the darker shading, that's low pressure, and in the brighter whites and yellows, that is high pressure. So up here around Hawaii at the moment, the air pressure is fairly high. That reduces the chance of wet weather for you. It can still be a bit windy, but the chance of rain not looking too high. Whereas down here in the South Pacific, this low pressure zone all along the tropical islands does increase the risk of thunderstorms and daily showers and some heavy rain as well that could be setting in when that low pressure zone moves by. So the ex-cyclone's moving through inland parts of Australia, but it is now falling apart. So let's try and make sense of the next 7 days with this animation for you. It shows most of the South Pacific here, and then we'll show you the North Pacific in a moment. So we'll kick off with that low pressure zone. Timestamp is down here. Not a lot of change going on this week. There's that low pressure zone and a couple of others. They're all kind of tracking along north of high pressure, which is coming through north of New Zealand. So these lows are all stealing energy off each other. That's why we're not seeing any sort of major storm bubbling up in the mix there. And the showers just carry on, and they're kind of repetitive in the same areas. So it's a stream of low pressure running along here in this sort of shape above the high pressure belts coming out of the New Zealand, South Australia areas. So that's the reason why there's not a great deal of change coming up over the next 7 days. Into the Northern Hemisphere, let's kick off again doing the same thing. Got a stormy system coming off Japan here, which deepens as we go towards the end of the week, driving in some stormy cold weather for them. Then off it goes up to the Aleutian Islands. We've got low pressure parked offshore from Northwest America, driving in some wet weather right down again into California with a cold change there. There'll be plenty of snow on the mountains. That's keeping a lot of people happy in California. And around Hawaii, high pressure zones keeping the conditions mostly dry. There are a few showers there caught up in that easterly flow. So let's try and make sense of that. Rainfall for the next 7 days ahead. Coming out of Japan here, the shading around that 80 to 100 millimeter mark over the next 7 days. Most of that wet weather in the next few days from that low pressure zone moving through. On the other side of the Pacific, on the western side of America, rainfall's not too high actually, but there's a little bit up here around Northern California, southern parts of Oregon. You're getting up around 60 or 80 millimeters. You'll have to Google that for inches, I'm sorry. And around Hawaii, mostly dry, some places even completely dry. Honolulu may not be seeing any wet weather. The next 7 days in the South Pacific looks a lot wetter. So that low pressure belt over here around Vanuatu, Fiji and Tonga, you're talking 100 to 200 millimeters of rain. Now there around Tonga, very fine line between dry and wet. So that low pressure zone, worth keeping an eye on. If it moves just a little further north to you, you might find that the capital in Tonga is quite dry. Around French Polynesia as well, not looking overly wet. Similar story around the Cook Islands. That wet weather does seem to drop off further to the south of you. High pressure north of New Zealand and around Australia, keeping things pretty dry in those places. That is your 7-day forecast for the Pacific. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next Tuesday.